Do you know what that is? Holistic empowerment. Well, Erin is going to tell you all about it. Erin is the CEO and global developer of a subtle energy activation system called Tesla Energy Lights. I told you you'll be learning something here today. To prove that this high-frequency energy system is real, viable, and beneficial for consumers, for the past 7 years, he's worked with licensed practitioners and PhDs to actually test it out. These include, for example, peace and clarity of mind, supporting personal goals, increased wealth, and of course, sustaining one's wellness. Today you can experience a no-cost session after Erin's talk. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Erin Goldhart.
Thank you. So what is holistic empowerment? Well, the definition is when one can actively execute their chosen emotional, mental, physical, and belief system intentions responsibly without reservation. That's pretty strong information, because that, to me, is what holistic is about. Holistic is not just physical, it's everything we are. And everything that we are that occurs is based on intention. Okay? So here we have Dr. Claude Swanson. And Dr. Swanson is a gentleman that's a quantum physicist. He lectures all over the world, and he becomes aware of remote sending of energy. It's like when we say prayers or send love to somebody that we care about, or even just think about. We are energy source, and we send energy to people.
One of the big discoveries in biology in the past 50 years is how important the mind is. Our mind plays a very important role in our health. How we think, the thoughts we hold, the energies that we focus on actually communicate directly with the DNA. This has been one of the great discoveries that it's not just the DNA operating mechanically like little machines producing proteins and operating the metabolism of the cells, but it is not that the programming of their chemical sequences determines everything about our health. What we have discovered in recent years is that there's a downward flow of energy from the mind down into DNA and RNA that could actually change the way DNA behaves, so that even at the cellular level, there's a response to thought and a response to thinking, so that the placebo effect for a long time has been recognized as a very real effect. It's as powerful as many drugs. Many people have been healed just because they believe they've been given some powerful wonder drug, when in fact it was a sugar pill, because the mind is so powerful it can have effects at the cellular level.
So the empowerment that we have is within ourselves, and using equipment to help us get there is a fuel. Now this chart on the left side, you can see that baseline, and what we had was a group of people, about the number that are in this room right now. And we turned on our machine that registers the impulses of energy in the room, and what we asked the group to do at one point, where you see the lines going up, was to send love. And you can see that it was pretty immediate, and it sustained for some time. So just like a video camera records events of things that we're unaware of, we have many different pieces of equipment to do the same thing. And we have tested that. I'm going to show you some of the results that we get in shifts scientifically. Love is my gift of the world. I fill myself with love, and I send that love out into the world. A statement that somebody that you probably have seen or heard on public TV or in his books, Dr. Wayne Dyer. He's written books on intention. And he also said some call source God or soul or spirit or consciousness. That has nothing to do with religion. I'm talking about a source of energy that lives within each of us. And we call it subtle energy. The reason why we call it subtle energy is because it's the life force that lives in humans, as well as animals, as well as plant life. We also call it chi, prana, torsion field, og. The reason why we call it different names is because at different stages in our evolution, people did not know that other people had already discovered the causal body or the etheric body, which is most close to our skin. So they gave it different names. But the point is, we're talking about the same thing. It's that invisible part of us that many of us can see with our third eye, some of us can feel with our energies or know it. So we're recognizing what we are. We are the cause of ourselves. So stop handing the keys over to somebody else trying to fix you. There is nobody that can fix you. The only person that can fix you is yourself. There's only one self-love that can come from one source. It's yourself. I can't give that to you. I can't sell it to you. So what happens when we basically forget to plug in our cell phone? The cell phone battery dies temporarily, and we have a resurrection. We plug it into the wall. Isn't that the same thing we do every night when we go to sleep? We plug ourselves into an altered state. And that altered state revives through magic, through the mysteries of the universe, a way of waking up and feeling better. Now here is some information that we have derived from a machine called the GDV. The lights, when used, will de-stress a person. You can see right there these little pie-shaped items. What that is that's before the session, and then after the session of adding the subtle energy, we start seeing expansion. And so when you can measure that scientifically, then you get into a parameter of more believability because you can see it. Does the gas that we put in our cars tell us where to go? No. Who does? Yeah, you do. Now, why is that important to know? Because you're already directing and managing yourself, even though you're being fueled. The fuel is not telling you like the GPS would, okay? What I want you to do is think of an item that you would normally buy. It could be a loaf of bread or anything else. What happens in that process of your intention? You see it in your mind first, right? It's not materialized. It's not in front of you. You have to go and get there. So you get in your car and you go to the store and you know where it is and you go find it and you pick it up. You've just materialized it. Very simply. Same thing if you were going to buy a house or a car, or if you're going to go on a vacation or seek out a job or seek out a relationship. Our wellness works the same way. So we are very empowered. Intention always precedes manifestation on all levels, no matter what. And this is a big point that I'm raising because when we feed you the energy with the Tesla energy lights, we're not going to tell you it's going to fix you. You're going to fix yourself by your intention. And what are you going to do? You're going to lay down. You're going to pretend you're laying in a river. The water's flowing from head to toe. At the head you have a male Tesla energy light, and at the feet you have a female. So we're going to create some harmonic balance with full spectrum energies. Because you're going to close your eyes. And when you close your eyes, you do this every night. right? So we're not changing your behaviors. We're not changing the way you intend. We're just focusing with an outcome that you can have pride in yourself saying, I did that. That's my freedom. So you want that relationship to work that's not working right now? Well, change those intentions. Now this is Kent Noonan. He's one of our inventors, and what he says on his video is,
when we sit down with a device like this, we find that we have different mechanisms going on within ourselves that are causing imbalance or emotional problems, stress problems, whatever. And so we each have our own need for what we're trying to draw from this. And so it's a very useful application to use this as think of it as an amplifier of your intentions. It's providing energy stimulation into your energy system, and you can direct that energy into your visualizations. So if you imagine you have something in your aura that is you don't want there, energetic patterns or emotional things that have just been with you for a long time and you need some resolution, well, you can visualize yourself being much better, much healthier, stronger, more able to speak your mind, whatever it is you're working on. You can visualize that clearly while this device is operating, and it helps your spirit, your biofield, to solidify that intent.
this is water. Now water, using distilled water, what we do is we take about 10 drops of water, put it in a small vial, and measure the energy that it is outputting. At this point, it's showing 11,789 pixels. When we put that same water on the lights, we remeasured it afterwards. And what you can see is that it went up 41% to 16,000 pixels. Now, what are we made up of mostly? Water, exactly. 70, 80%, what have you. So what's happening is that your water gets restructured. And what I would invite you to do is, if you have a bottle of water with you, or you can get a couple of cups off the coffee bar or back here, take that water, 2 glasses. 1 glass you're going to keep aside, and the other glass you're going to put on the lights and let them charge up the water. And you can taste for yourself the restructuring. It changes the molecular structure. So if it changes water, which is not saline, because we're basically a 0.9% saline solution in our blood and water, it actually has more of a shift than regular water. But of course, we're not going to drain your blood to let you taste it. So you'll have to trust that the water that you're tasting is a good example. This is a BIA that measures phase angle.
I'm Bob Rakowski. I'm a chiropractor, clinical nutritionist, kinesiologist, and the clinic director of the Natural Medicine Center here in Houston, Texas. I have lectured nationally and internationally for 16 years on different topics in natural medicine. And one of the things that I've lectured on is in-office diagnostics. We like to be able to quantify patients' progress and changes in patients' health and physiology. And one of the tools that we use for that is a bioimpedance analyzer. This is actually an FDA-approved device, and it measures electrical activity of the body, and from some very sophisticated software, then we can see how the cells have changed and how the body has changed. And if you see, I've got a graph that seems to go all over the place on the screen. We ran literally dozens of patients before and after on the Tesla lights, and every single patient that experienced the lights walked out of the room different than they walked in. Now, what's interesting is patients changed depending on what was going on in their physiology. We could see that some people experienced cellular detoxification. You could see that there was a fluid shift in the cells that would suggest that the body cleared toxins. I found that profound and really amazing. I had a level of skepticism as to whether or not these lights were going to be effective, and that changed literally within the first day. we saw every single patient change. Some patients, it was very clear that they experienced enhanced charge to their cell membrane. And it's generally accepted that healthy cells do a better job storing electrical charge than others.
And so when a person does a session, their phase angle will change. Then we have dark field. Now, blood in itself does not always look like this. This is a compromised woman that is really hard. She couldn't even sit up in her chair, kind of like what you're sitting in. She was really slouched. We gave her one session, and the same person with the same blood after the session shows that the cells started to separate, which means they became more coherent. In other words, they were not dumbed down like these are dumbed down. They can't operate very well. I don't know what disease she had, and I'm not concerned about that. What I'm interested in showing you here is that there's data to support the shifts. Now, what's really interesting is that I do these conferences 3 and 4 days at a time for 8 to 10 hours, do 20, 30 people a day. So I'm around this energy a lot. You come in for a session, you're going to get one session and go to the next place you want to visit. So I'm going to show you something as a result of my exposure. And we found this out quite accidentally because there was a dark field provider at one of the conferences, and I wanted to see what my blood looked like, and it was after the 4th day, so I went, okay, let's see what we got. Well, what you see here is kind of like a geometric pattern. And that geometric pattern was amazing in itself. But there were 3 women that were doing the testing, and they're looking at their screen and they're going, ooh and ah, and I'm going, what? What's wrong here? I mean, you know, I don't know what's going on. They say, it's that pattern. I said, what pattern? I see the cells, and yeah, they look healthy, but what do you mean? Well, what they meant is that there was an imprinted impregnation in the nucleus of the cells with dots, energy dots. Now that's what I would call 5th dimension transference to the 3rd dimension. Why? Because it's not physical, but it's energetic, but it's in the physical. It's kind of like merged. Now, I took them to some physicists, Dr. Swanson, who you saw there earlier, and some MDs, and they said, oh, you have a pathology. Anything that gets into the nucleus, you're sick. What's wrong with you? And I'm looking at them like, well, I'm not sick, and I don't feel bad, and I'm just fine. What's your problem that you don't know what I have here? And since then, we just haven't spoken because it's an anomaly. It's something that you won't see anywhere else. You'll see other instruments separate blood, but you won't see an imprint of energy into the nucleus. So we're still investigating it, but I wanted to show you some of the things that we uncover because science and data doesn't lie. Now this is Dr. Glen Rein, and he measured DNA, and these 2 charts that you see down here are charts that depict ethereal DNA and physical DNA. And they did a bilocation using the lights to affect the ethereal DNA.
The physical DNA is in the bottom and the etheric DNA is at the top. So here we have a couple of, I'm using the word plasma wave, but that's just kind of what comes off of the Tesla lights. So 2 things to notice. Let's start over here. At this, there's a change, without getting into too much technical detail, about in the spectrophotometer, and there's a corresponding change at exactly the same time in the etheric DNA, where it's coming down because it's losing energy, and it applies to the physical and to the etheric, but right about here, there's a blip, and both the physical DNA and the subtle DNA respond. And you say, okay, well, that's interesting. There's a correlation between the 2. That's cool. But look what happens over here. The etheric DNA changes, but there's no change in the physical DNA. So that means, what does that mean? Any guesses what that means? What does that mean? It precludes. There's an energetic change that precedes, I would use the word, but same idea, precedes the physical change in the DNA. Well, whoa, that's important.
So what does that mean? It means that if they took some DNA out of you, they had some of it right here physically, and then they shipped some of it elsewhere, and then gave a session to that person and that DNA, it actually shifted the DNA that was remote. In other words, not in the same room. So there is a connection that occurs. So you start seeing some interesting phenomenon which allows us to become responsible for ourselves, because you can't create for someone else what you create for yourself. We also work with Dr. Shealy. Norman Shealy has worked with Carolyn Mace for a number of years. You may have heard of her. Dr. Shealy has this mat, and that mat helps to de-age. In other words, the telomeres. And a lot of chemistry has been shared recently about reversing telomeres. His testing is that by using this mat with 2 Tesla coils, that using it for a year can reverse aging 6%. We normally lose 1% a year. So that means we net 5. Now we started to apply his mat to our lights, which increases the volume, in essence, increases the de-aging process. That is current right now. I don't have statistics to give you. Our suspicion is that it will be about 8 to 10%. This is EEG. And EEG measures what? Brainwaves. Theta, beta, alpha. And what we found is that by using the lights, we saw a big shift. See how you have the jump? So the jump went up 40% in theta and 88% in alpha. Well, that's when we self-heal, is when we sleep, when those waves start to become activated in REM sleep. So if we activate our system with a bump in the fuel of the energy, set intentions, all of a sudden, maybe we don't have to sleep as much. And if we don't have to sleep as much, we can go have more life during daylight hours and evening hours, like we did when we were kids. Remember when we were kids, we would run around with endless energy? So is that what de-aging is all about? Getting your life back instead of being too tired at 8 o'clock at night to go do something? These are children with autism. And at the Solution Center, they normally do a video which is called neurofeedback. And what we did is we started to put them on the lights before the neurofeedback. This is before, and you can see that the lines are separated. And these are brain waves also, it's just a different way of expressing them. And you see where a child is very easily upset because of that separation. But just notice here on the right side, it's a lot closer. So what that enables the practitioner to do, in this case, is to work with a client that will have a speedier recovery. Well, we find this with chiropractors, we find it with nutritionalists, we find it with acupuncturists, Reiki masters. In other words, anybody that's in any kind of practitioner field is going to be giving a service, and when we add subtle energy to it, it increases or actually lowers the recovery time or increases the effectiveness of their process. So what does that mean? They do a better job. There's more integrity in the services that they're being offered to the client. It's a bigger bang for the buck. It's a lot nicer to know that we can go into a chiropractor after a car accident with a whiplash, being in shock, get on the lights, come back into our bodies, get an adjustment, and have it hold for a week instead of a day. So the difference is, of course, the quality of life. This is India's sister in Colorado Springs. India is the host here today. Meta had some issues with an infection from a tooth. And that tooth spread throughout her body, and it collected, the toxins collected in her feet, and they expanded quite largely. In fact, her ankle was pretty big. And her glucose went up to numbers that they thought she might die. But she is very diligent and started to work on her diet and detox, and she brought down her level of glucose.
My name is Metanasa Drame Morales, and I live in Colorado Springs. I am a nurse and I have been a nurse since 1969. And I was working at Johns Hopkins Research Unit doing autoimmune system disorder conditions, connective tissue, and things of that nature. So I was pretty well adapted to knowing my way around the body, but not in the sense of treating my body in an alternative way, because I didn't know anything about that. I'm looking at the Tesla energy lights, and I'm understanding about how energy shifts and moves in the body, and especially in the cells. And so that's what I've been cleaning up, is the cells, as well as integration of the other areas of therapies that I'm using, such as colon hydrotherapy, fasting, juicing, whole foods, you name it, I'm doing it. But I needed a shift in the body. And once I started using the lights, it was just amazing how connected the body is and how it can shift and move within the cells themselves. But you know, we have had this conversation, and a lot of it is through, or I should say, by the way that you think. I asked God to come in and totally restore me as I held my foot up to the lights and my hands in the air right around the Tesla energy lights. That next morning, not only did I sleep all the way through, which I normally don't, I slept all the way through the night, and my glucose levels went back to normal. 89. They were at 89, and that was just, and I just felt incredible. My pH levels were a perfect 7. I feel that there is an importance here that we need to look at, and that is to make sure that people can functionally use their minds in connecting themselves, reconnecting, and knowing that every thought moves a muscle and it feeds a cell. That's what we're made up of. And so when we start realigning our bodies, our minds, our spiritual parts of us, we can heal. And that's what I'm looking forward to. These are some of the things that I have not been taught in medical school.
So we're not making any claims that it had anything to do with curing or healing any kind of disease, because that's not what we can do. But her quality of life shifted dramatically, and her confidence level went up tremendously, and she felt a lot better. And to me, that's a big win. So I'm happy to report her situation. Now I'm going to give you a protocol for a relationship. The reason why I'm going to do this is because it affects me and my relationships. And I have an issue with relationships myself. I don't know who has perfect, but I don't claim that. And Dr. McGill in Irving, Texas, shared this with me because his marriage was on the rocks, and he wanted to salvage it. He didn't want a divorce. He wanted to have his marriage work. So he started to use the lights using intention, and this is what he did. I saw my wife change her opinion of me. He wasn't trying to change her, just that he wanted her to see him differently. I changed how I saw us instead of changing her. Okay? Now, if you're in a relationship and it's working fine, I guess this might be boring, but it could improve if you had an issue. So he visualized her and tuned in intensely, knowing I am in the right place with the right person at the right time. So that knowing was part of his protocol. He made this up. Emotionally, he felt love, bond, and contentment. So he offered that to her. I would call this remote sending because he was on the lights and was not in the same room with her. No judgment, just detachment. He also played golf, and his golf score was in the hundreds, and he started to work in the zone, and his score came down, which is good, into the 70s. So he was real happy about that too. And we've had several people do that in sports, runners, bowlers, chess players. And in relationships, you just notice the couple that are facing each other, but if you happen to be here with your mate, you're welcome to get on the lights, face each other. There's a male unit and a female unit. The female unit's behind the lady, the male unit's behind the man, and you start looking into each other's eyes. And you connect on a deep, profound soul level. What do we say, that the eyes are the windows to the soul? What happens when you have two eyes looking into two souls? What a beautiful merging with that intention to have love. So if you want to do that, you can do it, okay? Oh, and by the way, you can also do it at India's Healthy Living office in Culver City, because she has a set of lights. Dr. Swanson, who you saw earlier, has a peace movement, and what he does is he sends out a message on a periodic basis as to when to send peace energies to the Middle East. And it's usually our daylight time to their nighttime, because they're normally at rest. That's the best time to send them loving energies. So what happens is we have educators throughout the world that have the lights. We send them a notice. Do you want to participate? Do you want to turn on your lights to support the good faith, the goodwill for promoting peace? And we get several that say, yes, we're going to play. They turn on their lights, and that sets up a grid throughout the world with the other thousands of people doing the same individually. So there's a give back here, because we can do it. And we have people that send energy to each other around the world who own the lights. And of course, if you're interested in purchasing a set, I'll be happy to talk to you about that, because they are worth having for the rest of your life. And we have other folks. This is a gentleman in Houston who has 60 people, and what he does is he takes pictures of his friends and associates. He puts them on the lights, writes their name down, and he lays down and says his own prayer. And he said, I don't have much to report, but I can tell you that none of the people that are on the lights are getting sick, so I guess that's a pretty good indicator. And this is the first time we did a remote session. This gentleman is in Sedona. This little boy is in Detroit. He has autism. And this gentleman was wanting to send his nephew the energy, but he didn't realize how potent it was. And so he got on for longer than a session, and the little boy started to detox. So it showed him that it was working and that he could kind of chill out a little bit. So that's everything I have to share with you today, and I'll be glad to share more individually with you if you would like. And thank you for listening.
And I noticed that whatever stress or tension I had would release, but also it seemed that whatever was up for me that was creating the tension seemed to dissipate as well. I would lay on the table and immediately I would feel rejuvenated, but also I noticed that I was not as scattered, that I could become more focused.
One of the things I would have to say that's happened in this last year is that barriers to intimacy have been reduced. That I'm enjoying relationships with people who are close to me in ways that I would have found inconceivable a couple of years ago.
People of all ages, all sizes, and all races, and all belief systems are getting past what they might consider taboo, and this is science. And science is not hard to see or deal with. So it's been a surprise to us that the community is lining up and everybody's seeking a change in their frequency.